Hey, so today we're going to be talking a little bit about some builds that have impressed me. I don't really want to call them necessarily meta builds, because I think there is a good argument in Warframe that the game is easy. And so calling anything a meta build is kind of like calling, I don't know, like an F1 race car the best car to drive because it goes the fastest, right? Like it doesn't really matter. You should drive whatever you think is the most fun to drive, right? Like there's not really a reason to really follow the meta in Warframe. So what I'm going to be instead talking about today is not necessarily meta builds, but more builds that I think are just good enough that you should know about them for one reason or another. This is one of those builds. So what you're looking at right now is a variation of Evade Lavos that I think is particularly interesting. So we're going to start with this one. I'm going to try to keep these builds kind of on the short side because I think the more important thing is that you get the idea of them and not necessarily that like you play exactly what I'm running. So let's get started. Okay, this is what I was running in the intro demonstration. What you might be noticing here is that we're missing quite a few mods. That is on purpose. I want you to understand that most of this build does not scale, at least from mods. Most of it is coming from Valence formation. So this is our forced gas proc, and then it triples the damage of our gas cloud. There's only one type of elemental damage in the game that will actually increase the damage of gas clouds, and that's pure gas. So if you had 260/60 mods like a toxin and a heat mod that made gas on your weapon, that doesn't increase the damage of the gas cloud, it just makes gas proc more often. So Valence formation is really important here because it triples that damage. Second, duration, very important here because it increases the duration of the gas clouds. The gas clouds can headshot, and that's what's extending the duration of evade, sight subsume. So together, this is like really important. Another thing that is worth noting here is that we're running combat discipline, and you might notice that we don't really have a way to heal on here, but headshots from evade actually do heal you. So on top of like having a way to proc Avenger here, we actually do have a way to heal from it just from evade by itself. Alternatively, like if evade is on cooldown for whatever reason, you can heal with Ophidian Bite. So this right here. So even if you got evade on cooldown and like you ran out of cooldown for some reason, you can still heal from this. So this is never detrimental, even when it's like at max rank like this. The other thing to note is that if evade does go on cooldown for whatever reason, like let's say you activated evade and then you jumped off a cliff like this, you'll notice that I have like a 30-second cooldown right now for evade. R3 can reduce the duration of evade. So you can see that my evade is immediately back up as soon as I did this. And so now if I go and I jump off a cliff again, once my 3 is back off cooldown, same thing again, we have evade back. So it's like really easy to recover with this build because we do that. If you want even more recovery, you can also put Swift Bite on here. So these two together will both reduce cooldowns. So that's also why we're running range so that our 3 can actually hit stuff. So this would be kind of the basic build that I would recommend for this. You don't necessarily need to run combat discipline in an Avenger. If you wanted to run a melee damage arcane here and then like corrosive projection or ready steel, I think that's perfectly fine. The other only quality of life that I would recommend is Prime Sure-Footed. He does have a passive that makes it so that he's immune to knockdowns, but Prime Sure-Footed is a good alternative because this won't always be up, and then sometimes you'll throw a glaive at the ground and explode it, and then it'll knock you back, and it's super annoying. It's like not dangerous because you're invisible, but it is important just for quality. So some variant of this is probably what I would recommend on the Zorus. This is a heavy attack build, so the idea is that you throw it out, and then you press your heavy attack button while the glaive is midair, and that will detonate it like this. Boom. The reason that this is important is because the Zorus actually force procs electric when you do that. So you can see forced electric proc, pretty good. So if you're going to run anything, probably something like this. Alternatively, if you want to drop these for galvanized steel and then regular pressure point or prime pressure point, I think that's perfectly fine. This weapon doesn't need that much. The only things that you really need is mods to scale the gas cloud. And then I'm running focus energy here just for the heavy attack efficiency. But if you want to replace this with something else, we don't really care how much electric damage we do because we're going to be force procking it. So melee influence is basically always going to activate. This is also similarly like just optional. The other thing worth noting here is that I am running duration shards and then 1 strength shard on my Lavos. And then I do have a casting speed shard here. Casting speed is the only one that I'd really recommend. And then duration is just extra credit. Like it turns out your gas clouds lasting longer is cool. So just use them if you feel like it. But they're really not that necessary. You can really, when I say this build is like cheap, what I mean is all you need is some duration, Valence formation, and evade subsumed. And then like a glaive that does damage. So don't get like too caught up in the details. Just remember that gas clouds can headshot and that Lavos makes gas clouds do a lot of damage. And that's probably all you need to know. Okay, so this next build is mostly important to me because I actually end up using it quite a bit for dailies and weeklies. Gara, after the Exalted rework, is one of the strongest nukers in the game. If you're not aware, basically her one has two different modes. Either you can tap cast it and it'll shoot like this line like this, or you can hold cast it and it'll do a swipe like this. We're mostly going to be focusing on the swipe here for obvious reasons. It turns out that a big pizza shape is really, really strong as a hitbox. And what's more important is that each of these hits also procs melee influence. So the reason that I want you to know about this build specifically is because of how good it is for the weekly calendar. So if you're not aware, once you complete 1999, there's a weekly calendar that shows up on the PC. If you have to do this and you're like me and you're like, oh, I hate chores, this is like one of the fastest ways to do it. Not only is she just a good nuke in general, but her Exalted weapon actually counts as a melee weapon. And so let me show you like what the weeklies is this week. So here was this week's calendar with all of the challenges. First one, Tekra with melee weapons. This counts as a melee weapon. Gara can clear it. Skaldra with melee weapons. Gara is a melee weapon. She can clear it. Skaldra troops with abilities. Gara's one counts as an ability, so it gets to clear this. Kill 20 Eximus. It's just exterminate. She's good at exterminate. Kill 500 enemies with melee weapons. This is like the most common modifier, this melee weapon one, and she's the best for clearing all of the exterminates with melee weapons, basically. You could make an argument for Korra, but Korra doesn't go through walls, and Gara does. So I basically did every single one of these weeklies this week with Gara, and that's probably like about 80% of them I just do with Gara because it's the fastest. I don't have to switch frames between them. I just show up and do it. So the other thing that you should probably know about this build is that it's functionally just max range. I do have Prime Surefooter on here because I'm lazy. If you wanted to, you could run even more range here, and I think that's perfectly fine. So just cutting drift over this, but very unnecessary. Like I have 2 Forma in this. It doesn't. She's very cheap to build, all things considered, as long as you have the mods for it. So Augur Reach, Stretch, Overextended. These are the 3 most important things. Aegis is optional, like you don't really need this. Energize is completely optional too. We're using Nourish for the energy regen and also for the viral, but the viral doesn't really matter. And then we just have enough efficiency to make sure that I can maintain just spamming the whole time. Here is the Shattered Lash build. What you'll probably notice here is that I have Drifting Contact on here just for the comfort because this kills. I don't need anything more than this because I'm not taking this build to cap. The only purpose of it is to clear my 1999 weeklies. So I would use it in that context, right? We're using this to clear stuff. We're doing as much electric elemental damage as possible so that influence can do its thing. That's why we have Elementalist on here too. And the rest of this build is just like whatever I felt like. Important build just because this is like the most brainless way to clear 1999 weeklies. I don't think it's really that close. And she's like slowly climbing my like used frames just because of that. I'll like log in, have to do my weeklies, and then just want to knock them out as quickly as possible. And it turns out the 30-meter no line of sight nuke that also procs melee influence is pretty good for that. So use it if you enjoy it, or if you just want to get the weeklies out of the way as fast as physically possible. So this next one is a 1 mod build. No subsumes. This is the whole build. Though actually, you know what? We'll call it a 4 mod build. Range, range, range. This is our build. So the reason that I'm going to be showing this build off is because I am not a Nezha player. I don't really play much Nezha, but this is like the only build that I've actually found comfortable on Nezha, and that is Slam Nezha. So the reason that Slam is so good on Nezha in general is because of Divine Retribution, but you can see that generally Slam still tends to kill stuff these days. Like it's pretty good, as long as you have enough height too, like the range isn't that bad. But Nezha in a lot of ways lets you use old Slam. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press 4 here. And I'm going to slam on 1 target. And everything in range will die. Melee Afflictions is really, really strong. In case you're not aware, it's like one of the easiest ways to hit damage cap in the entire game. And Nezha's 4 augment lets you spread those statuses to everything else in range. Divine Retribution is really, really strong. This is like what makes people play Nezha these days. And so rather than like the normal cast version of this, so this is Pyrotechnics, you might be more familiar with this version. The idea is that you just press 4 and then you press 2. And then as long as it hits stuff, you can see that each of these enemies got like 150 heat stacks on them, which is pretty good. That does a lot of damage, right? But it struggles in a lot of places because one, we're applying so much heat here that enemies that are resistant to status tend to just ignore it. And then two, it also costs energy. And what you really want to be doing with Nezha is just kind of using 4 whenever you can. And then you kind of need the rest of your energy for survivability. And so because of that, like the slam variation of this build tends to, in my opinion, do better at cap because 1, it frees up your subsume slot. 2, you can deal with acolytes. 3, like slam weapons are so strong right now that they scale to cap by themselves anyways. And so just giving them more range is just strong, right? So this is the build that I was shown by Will Cola and the Big Skig. They're both Twitch streamers. I'll be linking their stuff down in the description. Will especially just like finished capping, like level capping with every single frame in the game. I think he's like in the process of working out a video for it, like a retrospective. But this is the version of the build that I've been running. That's theirs. So same idea. We're running as much range as possible. We're running 2 Nero mods for the extra slam damage. We're running this for the melee damage. And then the rest of it is basically survivability and like efficiency so that we can press 4 more often. And that's the whole build. Like that's, that's all it is. Kodomire is a really good weapon for this. This is just a slam Kodomire. The idea is that we're using heat valence so that we proc both gas and the force toxin proc that it does on slam at the same time. And if you're not aware, Afflictions does crazy math when you have more than one status on the enemy. It like adds them both together and then does some crazy multiplying shit. I think there's a Kenjineer video on it, so I'll be finding that and linking it down in the description too. So the other weapon that I would recommend for this is actually the Architecton. So this is what I use for like general use. This is an influence build, but for Nezha specifically, because he has his crazy spears, Afflictions is just better. You might also notice that I'm not running that much electric damage here. Here's the Riven, it's just cold. And the reason that it's not running much elemental damage is because the status proc from Nezha's spears does not scale with elemental mods. So it just completely ignores any electric mods that you have in the build. So even though that the Architecton literally always procs electric, we're not running that much electric damage just for that. And you can see that this obliterates things. It's so good. Okay, so the next build that we're going to talk about here is Hildryn. The reason that we're going to talk about Hildryn is because I think she's actually one of the best frames in the entire game for just doing EDA. So if you need to do elite deep Archimedia and you don't like any of the frames that you want, Hildryn is your girl. She's so overpowered when it comes to like mid-level content that I think it's worth talking about. The first thing that you should see here is that Balefires actually ignores line of sight. So just from this alone, you can kind of see where this is going. We have an AoE that's ignoring line of sight and pushing enemies back quite a ways. I believe with the build that I'm running right now, it's about a 10.4 meter radius. You can get it up to like roughly 13 meters if you do max range. The second thing that is worth mentioning here is that she has an augment that increases the base damage of her Balefires by her shields when she's in 4 and if she's pressing the alt fire. So if I go into 4 like this, and then I press my Balefires, this just does more damage. And it's the base damage, so it's before any mods, it's before strength. It's really, really good. So Aegis Scale is basically mandatory. Here is the build that I run on Hildryn if I didn't like want to subsume. I do have some other variations of this build that require a subsume, but I don't think they're that important. Like for example, this is what I normally run, but I'm a crackhead and I'm running airburst rounds, so you don't need to run that. I think a build like this is much more reasonable. You don't even need this many forma, like you don't need an umbral forma to fit this build, so worth considering. One thing that you will notice here too is that I'm basically not running that much strength. And that's because the base damage from Aegis Scale is just so high that we just don't need it. While I talk over the rest of this, I'm probably going to be showing a lot of EDA footage. So you can kind of see that like even with a build like this is going to function just fine. Here is the Balefires build. So normally I run Corrosive. So if I need to do anything that isn't EDA, I'll run Corrosive like this. And then if I'm running EDA, I'll switch to a Radiation build like this. The only reason that I'm running Radiation is because Murmur are weak to Radiation. And the status chance of Balefires is like really low. It's only 10%. And so because of that, this build ends up being just fine for most content. So consider it like if that's something you want to do. I would recommend Fortifier if you're doing EDA for this. I think it's just her best option because she doesn't need the damage for that. If you're going to cap though, I would recommend Enervate instead, and then you would change your build a little bit to handle that too. So like for example, I have Avenger on this build to give myself crit instead. You would remove that, and you would remove combat discipline, and then replace those with better aura and arcane for your situation. The other thing worth mentioning here is that I do have 4 strength shards equipped. I think probably her best build would be 5 strength shards. I don't think there's really much else you could do that would be better. It just makes such a big difference to your base damage that I do think she's worth investing shards into strength-wise. Especially considering that like you mostly just want to run range on her. It's important to get your strength from something else, whether that's like an arcane or if that's shards or whatever. So the other half of this build that I think is pretty important is how your companion interacts with Hildryn. You might notice that I'm running a Xaku right now, and I actually just have overshields randomly. So I'm just going to try to drain my energy or my shields as much as physically possible here. And we'll just see if I can run out of shields. So we're just going to sit here, and I'm just going to let my shields go down. And you'll notice that my companion, every single time my shield goes out of overshield, instantly restores my shields. So this is with me draining it on 20 enemies. I have Haven active. I'm like doing everything I physically can to get rid of all of my energy. But because I have a Xaku equipped, this is just constant, like it's constantly just refreshing my shields. So if you're playing Hildryn seriously, in any capacity, I would highly recommend getting a Xaku. They make a huge difference, like for 90% of the content in the game. The alternative that you can do also is you can run a Sentinel with shield recharge, and then I believe this Taxon basically is able to equip the mod that just refreshes your shields when you lose them twice. So that's a very good option too, but for most general content, this is what I would recommend. Protect is the actual precept that matters. The rest of this build is kind of what you would expect. Tenacious Bond and Reinforced Bonds are both huge damage buffs for Hildryn, so would recommend these two also. The rest of this, you can kind of just choose whatever you feel like. All right, so this next one is going to be a weapons platform Xaku build. We're also going to be talking about the Gauss variation of it too, because I think it's just as strong. But the basic idea here is that there are only 2 frames in the entire game that can have thermal transfer. So it's the augment for thermal sunder and Zada's Whisper on the same build. If you've ever heard the term Zada's Blast before, this is kind of what it's talking about. It's talking about using Zada's Whisper with some sort of blast damage on your weapon. And what it does is this. So we are giving our weapon a 5-meter AoE that does basically increase damage just all the time. It's quite good on a large variety of weapons. Like the Quanta Vandal is like not that good of a weapon. It's like decent, but it's not like anything impressive. Similarly, like here's the Occucore. The Occucore is mostly known for being able to kill low level stuff, right? So it's not very strong to start up. But once it's actually started and we have all of our buffs active, what you'll see is that this thing just has crazy AoE, right? Like I don't have to aim at all. It just heat seeks 5 beams to enemies and then just immediately kills them. And what Xaku is doing here is giving the extra 5-meter AoE on top of all of these beams, right? So it's even more clear for weapons that already have a lot of clear. So some of the best weapons in the game, like the Occucore and the Torrid, for general content, just become absolutely ridiculous on Xaku. So again, here's just the Torrid. Same idea. Like more blast damage, Zada's Whisper to make that blast damage, or make the blast procs do even more damage. Like it's really, really strong, just as a weapons platform build. Here's what I've been running on Xaku. You can replace Energy Nexus here with just Equilibrium if you want to. And then if you are going to drop anything, what I'd actually recommend dropping is some of the strength. So like if you were taking this to cap, for example, and you wanted to just like bring this somewhere, Rolling Guard would be a great option. Bringing 2 recharge mods is perfectly fine. I think anything like that is perfectly fine. I've just been running Energy Nexus because the AoE is like so much that a lot of times I won't even have the chance to pick up energy orbs. So Equilibrium like doesn't help that much. So this is like enough energy regen for me from what I've been testing. So this is what I've been running. Arcane wise, I would recommend Arcane Aegis. Xaku has a lot of dodge chance, so his shield doesn't get that hit that often, but when it does, it's important to have Aegis. And then I do have Arcane Fury on here, but you can replace this with any weapon damage mod or like Steadfast if you prefer that. Just all you really need to do is just make sure that you have Thermal Sunder active and the Thermal Transfer Augment active at all times, and then make sure that Zada's Whisper is always active. If you prefer Gauss over Xaku, I think that's also perfectly okay. It's basically the same build. The only difference that you might see here is that I'm running Blind Rage instead, and I'm running less energy regen. I've just, for whatever reason, because I don't need to keep my 4 active to live the way that you do on Xaku, I need less energy for this build, so I've been running less. I'm also running Corrosive Projection for similar reasons. Like defensively, Gauss is pretty strong with Aegis and Fast Deflection, so together this is quite good. Other weapons that I would recommend for this is basically anything that's a beam. So Boar Prime's another really great example of this. So Boar Prime Incarnate. You can see that this is quite good too. Let me do that again just to not ragdoll everything. But you can see like this is going to be strong on basically everything. And again, once the Ocucore gets started, it tends to do Ocucore things. So quite good. Use whichever of these frames you like better. As far as I'm concerned, they're exactly the same. So it really doesn't matter. Just play whatever you think is fun. Okay, I think those are the only 5 builds I feel like talking about right now. I'm sure there are other builds that I've missed that you think are underrated for one reason or another. And I'd actually love to hear about them. So if you have a build that you think is super underrated for one reason or another, please feel free to share it in the comments. I'd love to do another one of these videos if people like this one. So anything that people think is super underrated or super like it should be meta but it isn't meta, definitely like shout it out and I'll try to give it the exposure it deserves if it deserves it. So second, I think it's worth shouting out a whole ton of people in this video because a lot of these builds I have learned about or learned about with them at the same time. So obviously like Mika is one of my best friends on Warframe period. So a lot of these builds I learned about at the same time that she did, or I learned about from her or from her chat. So she gets a super shout out as always. Beyond that, shout out to Will and Skig for the Nezha knowledge. I wouldn't have ever even tried Nezha really without that, without the slam build. So definitely worth giving them a look. And then a big shout out to basically everybody who has ever touched Evade Lavos, because there's like probably 30 variations of this. And none of them really clicked for me until I understood like how gas damage really scales together. And I'm just going to list like some of the videos of people who have done Evade Lavos stuff at one point in the past that I think are worth shouting out. So here's a list of all of them. So thank you Moog and Kengineer and Hard Merch and everybody else who has used an Evade Lavos build and shared it on YouTube before. This build is really broken. It's like really, really good. It applies to every frame. Like you could take Evade off and just put it on anybody else and it would still be fine. So also a very cool one there. And I think that's it. So thank you guys for watching. I'll talk to you guys next time.